Welcome to Trust Your Eyes. This was originally a video series on the channel, but I'm going to try it out as an audio version in the form of a podcast. It's pretty simple. Each episode will be about 10 to 15 minutes long, so it's pretty short and sharp. We'll pick out 7 topics from the latest AFL news and results, and there'll be a time limit of about 1 minute and 15 seconds to speak on each of the topics. We just completed round 7, so let's get right into it. So first up, what was the biggest takeaway from the Anzac Day afternoon game, which ended up a draw between Essendon and Collingwood? I think the biggest takeaway for me is that Collingwood's a little worse this year and Essendon is a whole lot better. With Collingwood, I think the veterans aren't playing as well as they had in 2023, and just on a couple of their guns in De Goey, who has a groin injury, and Nick Dacos, both of them haven't been as good as they were last season, and I think we can see that in the overall flow of their team. It's not panic stations at all for Collingwood if you're a supporter. I think you're in a pretty good position. You've stabilised from the really poor start, and hopefully all your guys can get back into form in the coming weeks. But Essendon for me was the big story. The midfield is humming. I love Sam Durham in there. He's still a little light in the frame, but he's a big body that they've been crying out for. And it's the recruits that have been 5 stars for me in terms of their list management. Gresham in the forward half, been fantastic. Ben Mackay, who I thought was a little down on form in the Anzac Day game, has been great besides that. And Dersma on the wing has allowed Nick Martin in defence, and now we're seeing that Redmond doesn't have as much responsibility, and Andrew McGrath is playing his career best stuff. So both sides are good. I think a draw was a fair result, but I'm impressed with the Bombers so far. Our next topic focuses on the Anzac night game. Are Brisbane in trouble after falling to a 2-5 start after a big loss to the GWS Giants? To me, they are in a fair bit of trouble, just playing lifeless really. They're so inefficient in the forward line, that power and aura that we associate with them, especially at the Gabba with Joe Danaher and Hipwood and Bailey and Rayner and Cameron, and that all-star forward line that can overwhelm you, just hasn't been there. They're 0-3 at home, which is kind of disastrous for a team that has barely lost in the home and away season at their home deck. And to me, the midfield looks really thin with no Will Ashcroft. It's a big reason why they got Josh Dunkley. But then if you tag Neil, what else is there? We know McCluggage is a star, but can kind of fade in and out. And Dunkley is just an in and under ball gatherer. Good defensive pressure, but it's definitely not a deep midfield when compared to other sides in the competition. And with the coach himself, Chris Fagan, I'm not saying he should get sacked, but he looks tired to me. He looks a little worn out. I think the racism saga at Hawthorn and all those meetings for mediation has probably limited him actually coaching, and just his mental kind of state surely would have deteriorated a little bit. Now, I don't think they'll make top 4 from this point, but a bottom 8 finish is probably what they should be aiming for, and hopefully for their sake they can get on a roll at the right time of the season. Well, in the other marquee clash besides Anzac Day, Geelong held off Carlton at the MCG on Saturday afternoon. At 7-0, are they in the box seat to win it all? Still too early to say for me who is in the box seat. We're barely a quarter of the way through the season. It's hard to think because there's been so much football. But from the outside looking in and watching a lot of their games, they look so strong, mature, but also skillful and fast, which I don't think a lot of people associate with Geelong. And most importantly, they are well coached. Chris Scott, their whole development system and some of their assistant coaches, really are elite, and you can see that on the field. But what it is allowing them to do this great start is to manage all their players. Even a guy like Dangerfield, who did his hamstring, he's going to be out for another month. They can rest pretty easy because, Cam Guthrie came back on the weekend and was fantastic. And no side, I think, in the competition can rotate mature players with young players so well. We see a guy like Jai Clark as one of their young guns playing in the VFL, and he'll probably come back in to replace Dangerfield. They manage themselves so well, and banking these early wins just will reward them in another few months' time when a guy like Tui or Duncan is sore. They can bring in one of these kids and rest easy knowing that they don't have to win games to be top 4. So they are setting themselves up perfectly, but I'm not going to declare them as the favourites at this point. On Saturday night, Fremantle responded against the Western Bulldogs after losing to arch rivals West Coast in the Derby. Fife and Sarong had 37 disposals each. On a scale of 1 to 10, how impressive were Fremantle? I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10 for their response on Saturday night at home with a roaring crowd against the Western Bulldogs. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good game between two mid-table sides that in the scheme of things will probably be battling out for those last couple top 8 positions. I don't think either side is really a top 4 challenger. For Fremantle specifically, the midfield looked great. I don't know why they were so bad against the Eagles, but against the Bulldogs, they were on fire. Fife was back to 2015 Fife, and just allows Sarong and Brayshaw to do their thing when Fife is winning the ball and feeding them out. Hayden Young was great as well, and that defence, at least Fremantle always will have one thing, and that's a good defence. No doubt about it, with Alex Pearce and Luke Ryan and Jordan Clark in career best form. I think they're going to be in a lot of games against good teams, Fremantle, because of that. But that forward line is still a huge worry. I mean, Josh Tracy was great. Patrick Voss, who debuted, showed something for me, but hopefully they can get Sam Switkowski back, because they need that forward line to be as full strength as possible to challenge the best teams and claim a few more scalps. North Melbourne are now 0-7, and all Alistair Clarkson can say is to stick fat. Harley Reid didn't play on the weekend, but should North have tanked in round 23 last year to secure the number 1 pick to select him? There is still a whole lot of water to go under the bridge before we can look back and say that North should have tried to have tanked in that last game of 2023. I'm not going to go that far at this stage now. Harley Reid has been unreal. He has an aura, a bit of swagger about him that no doubt has inspired his teammates. I'll give you that. But the senior core have been great. Yo and McGovern and Barras and Tim Kelly and now Jake Waterman seems to be a bit of a player. So West Coast senior core, if you compare it to North Melbourne's, has been 5 or 10 times better. It's been that dramatic of a difference, and it's the reason why they've been okay and won a couple games. So no doubt Reid has been a big part of it, but let's look at the North Melbourne guys that essentially they picked up instead of Reid. Dersma's passed the eye test. His stats don't stick out, but kicked a couple goals on the weekend against Adelaide. Good hands, roaming half forward. I see a lot of potential there. And McKercher, I mean, he looks like a young Zach Merritt. 32 disposals, well over 80% disposal efficiency. So Reid has been a star. He's been marquee, but Dersma and McKercher are performing pretty well, even though it's going under the radar. The showdown is next week. Adelaide got into some form against North Melbourne, while Port Adelaide left St Kilda a chance all night with bad goal kicking and now have injuries to key players. Who wins and why? Well, there is a bit of news coming into this game that Connor Rozee will get up and play from that minor hamstring. I have no idea how, but trained well, has been feeling pretty good. But they will lose Alira to that concussion, and Sam Powell-Pepper is out for the season with that ACL. So it's 2 significant players out, and who knows how hampered Connor Rozee will be. So it's a big reason I'll be going with Adelaide. A lot of their players are back in form, even though they lost to Essendon a couple weeks ago. Dawson looks back to his best, kicking the ball a lot. Tex has been playing well, and the small forwards in Rankin and Rochelle are showing bits here and there. So I do like them. And then there's a couple other reasons under the radar why I like Adelaide. Rory Sloane retired. Well, what a way to send him off with a big, powerful win against your arch rivals. Just is setting up beautifully for that. It's an Adelaide home showdown too, so there'll be a pretty large Crows crowd in a game that they pretty much have to win. And then Daniel Curtin is going to be debuting as well, the man they traded up to select, probably playing in defence. So everything to me is pointing towards the momentum at the start of the game will be with Adelaide, so I like the Crows. To finish off, besides the showdown, what is the most interesting game in round 8? Well, the showdown, the derby, and those type of games are massive rivalries, but for me, maybe because I'm Victorian, I have a bit of a bias. Collingwood and Carlton on the Friday night is still the greatest rivalry in the game. It's 2 massive Victorian clubs that really hate each other. I think deep down there might be a little bit of respect, but not too much. So for me, just in a rivalry sense, it's a big game. But then also in the ladder, I mean, if the Pies win, they're only one game behind Carlton. And if Carlton win, then they extend their gap between Collingwood and are also, well in that mix for that top four, if not top two position. But there's a few other marquee games that are flying under the radar a bit. Keep an eye on the Swans and Giants. There's been some words spoken between those two sides this week and a lot of history between them. And then the D's and Cats will be a great game. It'll kind of benchmark to see where Melbourne are at. And it'll be a tough game for Geelong without a couple players to see if they can stay unbeaten. And the final game of the round in the Q Clash, pretty much a must-win for Brisbane if they want to be fighting for that top four, which I doubt. But definitely if they're going to be a top 8 side, they need to be beating a pretty young Gold Coast side. Thanks for listening to the first edition of Trust Your Eyes as an audio podcast. The aim is to have these come out every Tuesday or Wednesday, so keep a lookout if you watch the YouTube channel regularly for when these come out. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll keep trying to improve upon it and come up with a few more ideas. So I'll see you guys next week.